So, Leaders' Questions, Deputy Doherty.
Gurmaigad Yaskin Corlia, a Hanish Horin the Figure at Apology and really in Ye Modular Rarish Fonu, Emmy and Down your Gunyabi. Rail more Jarek explankal, the highly textile Shanahan, between Major and then Deef and Givrishaw. August Shaw Gulieri Carlo, Toshna will Factiantic and Realtis, Dulling Leclish and Sell, because Hun smocked the horror Freisna. Tareshtiv gan Rudderby a Yenu, Fathers of Aiden Billy, Dolanergis and Erge Goni. Once you've been critical for you for Haki Ladini, Hacksline Street and Yevru Shokhate. Tonish, the energy arrears figures published yesterday by the regulator are nothing short of alarming. A flashing red light for what households are already enduring and what lies ahead this winter. They tell us that over 300,000 households are behind on their electricity bills, and gas bills tell the same bleak story. 180,000 households are now in arrears with their gas. Tonish, that's over 1 in 4 households in this state can't pay their gas bill. And that doesn't even include all of the households that are just managing to keep up. And Tonish, these are not just numbers. They are cold living rooms where families sit wrapped in coats because they can't risk switching on the heat. They're older people rationing warmth, terrified of opening their next bill. They're parents that are hiding final notices, hoping that their next pay packet will stretch far enough to keep the lights on. And all of this is happening because your government has done nothing to tackle the rip-off and get prices under control. And what's been your response to rising bills? Well, you pulled the energy credits that helped people survive last winter. Instead of relief, households are hit once again. Energia, SSE Electricity, Pinergy, Board Gas Energy, Flow Gas, all imposing fresh price hikes, pushing 1 million homes into an even more impossible situation than they currently are in. And what makes this even more galling is the fact that energy companies are refusing to pass on the full reductions in wholesale costs. So families are being squeezed from every direction, by suppliers, by inflation, by your own government decisions. And let's be clear, these arrears figures only go to July. And that was before we have the cold weather that we have now. It was before the last round of price hikes. It was before people even turned on their heating. So God only knows what the numbers are going to look like this Christmas if this crisis continues, Taoiseach. And this government can't plead ignorance. You refuse to take on the energy companies, you refuse to empower the regulator, you refuse to reform hedging prices, you refuse to deal with the pricing system, the PSO and the network charges, or stop more and more data centres driving up costs. You will not act, you won't intervene for customers, so here we are now. The worst period of energy arrears since records began in this state. So I'm going to ask you plainly, because you can't deny the fact that we've never seen so many people that can't meet their basic bills of electricity and gas. How can you justify cutting energy credits when bills are higher now than they were this time last year and that they're rising even more? How can you justify taking away those energy credits that people were dependent upon when 300,000 households are behind on their electricity bills and over 1 in 4 households can't pay their gas bills, and arrears are rising faster than records have ever shown? So do you acknowledge, Taoiseach, that families in energy arrears are increasing and increasing under your watch, and unless you intervene, we are going to see a serious winter of discontent for so many, many families?
Firstly, I want to say I'm very conscious of the cold weather in the past number of days. I'm very conscious of the fact that there has been a cold weather alert from Med Éireann just issued in the last hour or so. But I do want people at home, I want to specifically speak to people at home, to know that unlike the assertion being made by Deputy Doherty, this government is intervening and is taking real actions to help people with fuel poverty this winter and in the here and now. And we've done a number of things already, Lascia and Corla, to help. In the budget only a few weeks ago, we took the decision to increase the fuel allowance. The fuel allowance is now worth over €1,000 per year for that fuel allowance period which we're now in. So the people in this country, more people than ever before, more families than ever before, more households than ever before, are getting access to direct assistance with their fuel bills from the government. That's an action we took, and I'd encourage everybody to look at that broadened criteria and to put in their application for the fuel allowance. Secondly, not only have we increased the fuel allowance, but we've also expanded it to those receiving the working family payment. Because you talk a lot about working people, working families in this Dáil, Deputy. That's why we've actually decided to make sure that people who are in receipt of the working family payment are now, for the first time, also able to be in receipt of the fuel allowance. And this means that now over 450,000 households, or roughly a quarter of all homes in this jurisdiction, will qualify for the payment. We're supporting over €500,000 households, many of them who are pensioners, with an allowance of €420 towards their gas or electricity bills under the household benefits package. 532,000 homes receiving that support, another practical measure being funded by this government. We took the decision in the budget only a few weeks ago to freeze the VAT rate at the lower 9% rate on gas bills and electricity bills for the next 5 years, providing that reduced VAT rate not just in the here and now, but for the lifetime of the mandate of this government. Fifthly, we've reduced the PSO levy, helping people directly to save money on their bills. Minister O'Brien has met with the 4 largest energy companies, and they've confirmed that they each have hardship funds in place and we're working to support vulnerable customers. And I want to be very clear. This winter, nobody should be afraid to turn on their heat during the cold weather. And I want to say, and I hope everyone will help us amplify this message, for any person who's under serious financial pressure, they can seek an additional needs payment in addition to what I outlined already, with heating costs through their community welfare officer. On top of these direct financial supports, we're also investing record funding in retrofitting to help people upgrade their homes, make their homes more energy efficient, and make sure that people's homes are warmer. And the budget for the Warmer Home Scheme has increased to €280 million, an 11-fold increase since 2020. I want to specifically address the issue of disconnections. A disconnection moratorium is now in place for registered vulnerable customers from the start of this month until the 31st of March, and indeed for all customers for the winter period in a few short weeks' time. So yes, there's always more to do. Yes, the cost of energy is a real cost. Yes, we need to look at how we can drive down the cost of energy, how we can move more quickly to renewable energy, how we can do even more to support people. But please don't mislead people, particularly people who might be tuning in to this debate today, in terms of the fact that there are supports that are available to people. There are decisions we've taken that are available to people in the here and now. And I'd encourage people this winter to know that, to not be cold this winter, and to seek those supports and assistances that are in place.
Doherty.
That's going to be cold comfort to people who are listening to this. Don't be cold this winter. Do you not listen to the facts? Do you not listen to what has been said by the CRU, the hard, unvarnished facts? 70,000 more households, more families, more individuals, more households, more real people cannot pay their electricity bill in the first 6 months of this year. The record number that we're seeing is from the middle of July, the warmest month of the year. These are people who are not just more people than ever before that are in electricity and gas arrears, but also the value, the amount that they're in arrears has also increased. And this is happening even with energy credits supplied last year. Your response has been to withdraw those energy credits. How and under God do you think that these families are going to survive? How do you think that they're going to meet the needs this winter? You're saying don't go cold this winter. People are cold today. People are making these real-life decisions today not to turn on their heat in their house.
Thank you,
People have had to make the decision not to pay their gas and electricity bills because of the decisions of your government. I put it to you, you have consciously made it impossible for people to stay warm this winter. And I would ask you to bring forward energy credits to support these families and provide them with a lifeline during these winter months.
So I'm sure you accept that in those numbers, those large numbers, there are many people, many people who are benefiting directly from and will benefit from the financial assistance from this government towards energy that I've just outlined. But you never make those points. And you have a partitionist approach when it comes to energy policy.
And health.
You think it's appropriate, you think it's appropriate. You don't think it's enough for somebody in County Louth to have €1,000 in fuel allowance this winter, but you think someone up the road in Armagh should get by on just £100. This week in the Assembly, now you lead the executive, your party. The First Minister of Northern Ireland is from Sinn Féin. The Finance Minister in Northern Ireland, don't you get upset when I bring this up? The Finance Minister in Northern Ireland is from Sinn Féin. The Economy Minister in Northern Ireland is from Sinn Féin. The Executive is headed up by Sinn Féin. You're the largest party in the Assembly. You haven't brought forward a cost of living package. The fuel allowance is a paltry £100 to £300 compared to the €1,000 here. So to the people at home this winter, access our support, but don't fall for their hypocrisy.
Like the truth.
Don't like the truth. You don't
You've had your opportunity, please. Deputy Doherty. Deputy Mark Wall, can you please put your question?
Thank you very much. Taoiseach. I tried.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Doherty. Deputy Mark Wall, please. I
want to raise with you today the car park that motorways into Dublin have become, and in particular the M7 and the N7. I want to be clear of my support for increased public transport for Kildare South, but we know this extra capacity will take years. Commuters on the M7 and N7 cannot wait that long, Taoiseach. Since I first raised this, I've been inundated with messages from commuters right across Leinster and North Munster. Thousands of people are now spending their lives stuck in daily traffic, stuck up to 3 hours trying to get to work. They are leaving their family homes at 6 a.m. just to barely make it into work for 9 a.m. It's not just workers that are affected, Taoiseach. People are now missing critical medical appointments like chemotherapy because of these delays. Cancer patients are telling me that they are having to pull over to the side of the road because they are so unwell and can't make their appointments. Can this House imagine what it's like to be undergoing cancer treatment and being trapped in traffic for hours on end? The problems for commuters are because of the pressure and availability of housing, the lack of timely and fit-for-purpose public transport, a government flexible working policy that is simply not fit for purpose, an inadequate response to minor accidents and breakdowns compounded by driver frustration and education, and a lack of Transport Gardaí on our roads. Taoiseach, last week I called for Transport Infrastructure Ireland and the Minister for Transport to set up an emergency response unit for the N7, M7 and other major motorways that are experiencing massive traffic delays. This is already in place on the M50. It is, of course, not a silver bullet, but it will allow for better responses to minor road traffic incidents and will help prevent traffic coming to a standstill at rush hour. For many people in rural Ireland south of the capital, they can't get a public bus or train because there are too few options. For many, the times of public transport will not allow them to get to work on time. For many parts of rural Ireland, people have no other choices but to use their cars to get to work. Where public transport does exist, people are crammed onto trains and are ringing their public representatives to say that the bus did not show up. In Kildare South, I am fighting for an hourly train service along the Waterford to Houston line. This would make a massive difference to people living in Athy, Carlow and Kilkenny and others along the line. The first train from my hometown of Athy is at 6:41 in the morning, many commuters failing to get to work for 8 a.m. and having to revert to their cars. The government's own code of practice on flexible working and hybrid working is not working. The call back to the office and the workplace is a problem highlighted by many commuters who have contacted me over recent days. Taoiseach, the government need to legislate for a real right to flexible and hybrid working. And will government launch a new Operation Free Flow and instruct Transport Infrastructure Ireland to provide an emergency response to accidents and breakdowns on the car park that is the N7 to reduce the congestion for so many commuters?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
I want to thank very much Deputy Wall for raising this issue. And firstly, at the outset, let me say the NM7 corridor is, of course, a critical part of Ireland's national road and motorway network. And recognising this, and I'll get to some of the challenges now, but there has been significant investment in recent decades, most recently the completion of a major upgrade to the motorway between Naas and Newbridge in 2021, which also included a bypass in relation to Sallins. But you're also right that since 2019, traffic levels on the M50 have grown by approximately at least 11%, which equates to around an extra 50,000 trips per day. And we are seeing the impact of that congestion on our road network, on our motorway network. And you're also right to highlight the fact that there's real-life impacts for this. You gave the very harrowing reality that a cancer patient stuck in traffic trying to get to a crucial hospital appointment. I can think of the impact for people trying to get to and from childcare providers, meet school time collections, and that's stress, as well as, of course, the environmental impact of being stuck in congestion and the impact that that can have on air quality and our environment as well. So we are aware, very much aware of the congestion. I'm aware of the regular accidents and the safety issues as well in relation to this route. And we are, through our National Development Plan, intending to invest a huge amount in transport, both the road network, upgrades to the road network, but also the points you make in relation to making public transport work more effectively for more people who wish to use it once it works in a way for them. And Minister O'Brien, with Minister Canny, will shortly outline what we call the sectoral investment plan, basically the outworking of the new National Development Plan funding in terms of the advancement of projects. I'll ask that he take on board the comments that you've made here today, and also the constructive suggestion you've made in relation to TII and what more they might be able to do. You've rather cleverly and appropriately linked this to the debate, the discussion around policy development with regard to remote working. And as you'll remember, we gave a commitment that there would be a full public consultation in relation to the policy of remote working. A lot of good work has been done in this area. I'm informed that there's over 400 now connected hubs. I opened a remote working hub in my own hometown very recently, and I think the rollout of our national broadband plan, something that was opposed by many but has worked and been delivered on time and on budget, has made a real difference in terms of people being able to have that crucial infrastructure to work remotely too. But only this week, only on Tuesday of this week, my colleague Minister Alan Dillon launched that public consultation. It was as part of a legislative review of the right to request remote working. I just inquired the other day as to how the review is going, and I'm told that over 2,000 people have already made submissions. Quite incredible. I think around 1,600, roughly speaking, of those 2,000 come from workers and around 400 from employers. So I'd encourage you and encourage everybody to make their views known, and we will consider what legislative steps to take and what reviews and amendments to make to any legislation on the back of that public consultation.
Deputy Wall.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. You said it was clever and deliberate, but it's actually a reality, Taoiseach. And it is commuters that are actually coming back to me are asking for remote work and flexible work. So there is a public consultation, and we would encourage everyone. I think the 9th of December is the closing date for that. But we do need to have that discussion, and we need new legislation. But Taoiseach, I'm asking you today for a new operation free flow for the M7 and the N7, because that's what's needed for the thousands of people who are trapped there every day. Will the government commit to additional signage, deploy additional Gardaí on the road to assist with the flow of traffic? Will you commit to hourly trains into Dublin as part of the government housing plan, where you plan to build thousands of much-needed homes in the commuter belt? Will you consider using hard shoulders for public transport? There are so many issues that are being raised with me. TII need to act. We cannot continue the way it is, Taoiseach. Productivity is down. The mental health of commuters and those travelling into Dublin is affected on a daily basis. It is simply not good enough, and I ask you to revert to the Minister for Transport and TII as quickly as possible. This is urgent, Taoiseach. I
ask that all of those sensible suggestions are taken on board by Minister O'Brien. I'll ask him to come back directly to you, and I'll ask him to engage with TII and the NTA in relation to this too, around Operation Free Flow signage, Gardaí, and the frequency of the trains as well. And I join with you in encouraging people to make their views known on the consultation in relation to remote working. Let me, I suppose, remind ourselves that remote working in Ireland, or at least remote working at scale in Ireland, arose very, very quickly from the COVID-19 pandemic. And the pace at which people changed their work practices, the pace at which employers changed, public services changed, education to some degree, was huge. But it was also somewhat unplanned, if we're being honest. There was a global pandemic, people were trying to keep the show on the road. We then legislated legislated for the right to request a remote working arrangement, and that came into force for all employees on the 6th of March 2024. This was a big step forward in terms of entitlements and in terms of having a legislative framework for the first time. It's right and proper now, though, that we consider it. If we get remote working right, there's huge opportunities, including expanding access to the labour force, including addressing issues around congestion. But also, we've got to make sure we get it right in the context of being able to support our economy, but also make sure our public services work in a way that our constituents expect. And I think this consultation is an opportunity for everyone to have their say.
Thanks, Taoiseach. Deputy Ruth Coppinger.
Thanks, Taoiseach. Taoiseach, survivors of gender-based violence just held a press event calling for government action and for people to attend global marches that will be taking place on Tuesday, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So Natasha O'Brien, Becca Clark, I'd like to welcome to the gallery, who are a number of the survivors who just spoke. I also want to send solidarity to the loved ones of Stella Gallagher, who was killed in Cork. Now, Taoiseach, violence against women and LGBT people is a global epidemic. The UN recognises it as such. Every 10 minutes, a woman or girl is killed by a family member. And the Femicide report in the UK says that more women are killed by their sons than by strangers. Now, there's no riots, there's no calls for debates in here when we hear stats like that, but that is the actual reality. Across the globe, women and all genders will march. In South Africa, there's going to be a shutdown. And in Ireland, Rosa will call protests in Dublin at 5:30, at City Hall, Limerick and Cork on Tuesday as well. Now, the UN is highlighting online violence and online misogyny this year. And there's no doubt that it is spreading misogyny, which is the bedrock of violence against women. So this week, we had the US President say to a reporter, "Quiet piggy." We had the New York Post saying, "Did women ruin the workplace?" We are seeing a huge backlash against women's rights. And companies that are based here, who enjoy huge tax breaks, are participating in the grooming of young boys and the spreading of the manosphere and of misogynistic ideas, such that traditional attitudes, as they're called, are re-emerging. Now, Taoiseach, what is in your control is the justice system, and I want to raise quickly two issues with you. Number one is the fact that the DPP, over the last decade, has not prosecuted 13,000 cases of sexual violence, because people like Nikita Hand, people like Becca Clark, who's here today, had their cases turned down, even though they were one of the 5% of people who actually tried to prosecute a case. I want to raise the other issue with you as well of the bill that's been drafted by the Justice Minister on counselling notes, something I've raised with you before. This is identified as a misogynistic and very traumatising issue for so many survivors, the fact that their therapy notes can be used by the defence. We now have the Justice Committee, the National Women's Council, the Rape Crisis Centre, all of the professional therapists and psychologists and all survivors want a complete ban on this. You need to tell your minister to go back to the drawing board and to find a way to make counselling notes non-permitted evidence. They are third-party notes, they're hearsay in fact, and they are not evidence for a trial. And we need a complete ban on this now. No more messing around, no more re-traumatising people who actually have the gumption and stamina to take a court case in this country, which is very rare.
Thank you very much, Deputy Coppinger, and thank you for raising this really important issue, and thank you indeed to people being here in the gallery today. Domestic, sexual and gender-based violence is a global epidemic, and indeed it is an epidemic in Ireland, and we should call it out for that, and we should acknowledge the advocacy and the bravery of those who come forward and seek to bring about the much-needed change in this area. And it's also not an issue that must be just seen as an issue to be addressed by women. It involves leadership from all of us in all political parties, right across this stall, right across this House, right across society. I would just say, and I don't mean to be argumentative on this at all, but just when you said, there aren't debates in this House and stuff, I beg to differ. Perhaps there's an argument that we could have more debates in this House, and we should. But I certainly welcome the fact that there's much more discussion, both on a legislative basis, at Oireachtas committees, and indeed at cabinet committees, on issues regarding domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, and much more of that. I also want to inform the House that we've agreed at the North-South Ministerial Council that we will work on this on a North-South basis. And I want to thank the First and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland for their engagement with us on this too. And I think that's an indication of how seriously this issue is being and should be and must be taken across the island of Ireland as well. I'm not going to use all the time to let people know what we're doing in this area, because we are doing things. We've established CUAN, the national agency. We have a zero tolerance strategy. We are seeing funding for additional safe spaces. The Minister for Justice is taking this matter extraordinarily seriously, and the Minister has secured government approval to progress the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences, Domestic Violence and International Instruments Bill 2025, which includes measures to allow perpetrators of domestic violence be included on a new register run by the courts, and to strengthen the law further in relation to sexual consent, which I think is an important, a very important step to take as well. I won't comment on the work of the DPP just for fear of causing any challenges in terms of the separation between the DPP, but I do take that point you make in terms of our criminal justice system, our legal system, our justice system needing to take this extraordinarily seriously. And I must say, instinctively, I agree with what you've said in relation to counselling notes. Cases should be heard in relation to the evidence before them, and when somebody goes to seek counselling, to seek therapy, that confidentiality, that privacy, that sensitivity, that matters. And what I won't say is something in this House that turns out to be legally wrong, but the government will wish to maximise, absolutely, to try and get as close to what you're suggesting as possible. And we will take very seriously the recommendations of the Justice Committee, and also, though, the recommendations and the work of the likes of the Rape Crisis Centre, who have a very significant degree of expertise. So I'll certainly commit the government to working collaboratively and closely across the House in relation to this matter, and I'll specifically engage with the Minister for Justice on the issues you've raised.
Coppinger.
Yes. The last debate on gender-based violence, I was here on a Thursday. It was pretty empty, I can tell you, and it was many months ago. But in any case, yeah, I get leaders' questions once a month, right? So if you could focus on the issue of the counselling notes and the DPP, and you did at the end there, fair play. But on the counselling notes, so where we are is that the Minister has drafted a bill under massive pressure and campaigning by survivors who shouldn't have to do this. You know, we had Sarah Grace telling the world she'd rather be nearly attacked again than go back into our court system. That should be a cause for real concern. And one of the issues has been therapy notes being used by the defence. So the Minister has drafted a bill, but it leaves the option open. The judge is going to decide if they can be included. But even the fact that that decision could be made is traumatic, and it is forcing so many people to choose between therapy or a trial. So what the Minister is proposing is the easy route, but it's not the correct route. And I'm asking you to ask him to go back to the drawing. His legal acumen, you know, all of the legal expertise that you have, should be able to come up with a way to rule out counselling notes as evidence for a fair trial in line with the Constitution. And maybe we could return again to the question of the DPP. If not today, it's a real problem for Nikita Hand, who had to take a civil case, and God knows the difference she made by doing so. And people like Becca, who did everything right, every single thing right, and didn't get her day in court.
Yeah, and Nikita Hand is an incredible woman who I've had the honour of speaking to, and I think our media need to reflect on the amount of coverage they give to some people who represent the very worst of us, vile individuals, versus the attention that they give and the focus that they give to courageous, incredible people like Nikita Hand. And I think how these issues are framed in media should also be considered too. I'm not disagreeing with you in relation to this. I don't think anybody would disagree with the idea in this House, regardless of party politics, that counselling notes should not be a part of a criminal trial. And I accept fully the logic in your point in terms of the chilling effect, even of the possibility of a note. So let me agree with you on that point. What I will do is accept your challenge in terms of understanding the legal advice available to the Minister as to why the bill as currently drafted is the way it is, and see if there is a possibility of making further changes. I don't want to make a commitment to the floor of this House I can't deliver on, but I am committed to having that conversation with government colleagues and to come back to you directly.
Deputy Michael Collins.
Thank you, Taoiseach, last week in the Dáil, I spoke of how 2 of my constituents were refused an exchange of their Belgian driving licence and will have to get provisional licences and retake the test. As they live in rural West Cork, they are essentially going into COVID lockdown for 5 months, unable even to get to their shops for a bottle of milk. This is the case, the length and breadth of this island, for many people. It is demeaning, distressing, unfair, extremely expensive and an unnecessary burden. Irish citizens left Ireland in the difficult times to find work in the USA. Many of those are now looking to return to Ireland, to raise their families or to retire, bringing with them their skills and their wealth. We are telling these Irish citizens, many of whom have been driving for over 40 years and originally held an Irish licence, that they now need to get L-plates to drive in their own country. Our younger citizens have been driven abroad in a time full of employment by the high cost of housing. Now we are trying to attract back those skilled doctors, nurses, construction workers and engineers that the country badly needs. But when they come back, they can't drive to these jobs. The IDA has been working tirelessly in this difficult global environment to attract and retain companies from the USA to invest in our economy and to create high-paying jobs. But the senior executives of those companies are being told they have to put L-plates on their own company BMWs. This country should be better than that. Many in the Dáil may be familiar with the GA President Larry McCarthy, who returned to Ireland in 2021 and had to hire a driver so he could do his job, despite having originally held an Irish licence and then a US licence for 37 years. As an immediate action, will you, Taoiseach, direct the Minister for Transport to require the RSA and the NDLS to revise their policy to recognise previous Irish driver licences without the 10-year limit? Taoiseach, this is a straightforward, zero impact on road safety action, which would immediately support the Irish diaspora and returning Irish citizens. In parallel, as a solution to the broader problem, will you, Taoiseach, request the RSA and the NDLS to develop a proposal for a pragmatic and risk-based process for exchange of foreign driving licences, building on best practices and precedent from other EU countries? Taoiseach, in the current RSA approach of seeking reciprocal driving licences, agreements with the individual US states is getting us nowhere. I am not surprised, as I have not been able to find a single example where an EU country has a reciprocal driving licence exchange agreement with even one US state, likely because the US state licensing regimes are incompatible with EU standards. I expect the Minister and the RSA are well familiar with the fact, and I know we are unlikely to meet the commitments we made in the programme for government that you have set. Instead, Ireland can and should follow the example of many European countries such as Belgium, Finland, Denmark, Austria and Portugal, who have unilateral licence exchange process which includes the USA operating in tandem with these reciprocal agreements. The RSA should leverage the practices and precedents from our EU partners and in a risk-based manner to revive our current restrictive system.
Gurmagat, thank you, Deputy Collins, for raising this issue. I suppose there's probably 2 parts, I think, to the question. So, I mean, the first part is in relation to the 10-year limit on the licence, after which the licence expires. So, my understanding of this is that because our Irish driver licence operates within a framework of EU law, the driving licence legislation is EU legislation which all member states must comply with. I always get nervous saying that as though we're blaming the EU. We're part of the EU, so we can always explore these issues with partners. But the standards for testing drivers are set at an EU level. And the benefit of this to all of us is that for opting into this EU-type system, it does enable us to have a driver's licence that works across the European Union. So rather than it being, I suppose, an impediment to an Irish citizen, it's actually really quite a great gift, because it actually has the primary benefit of allowing a universal EU licence, which is a huge benefit, of course, to people from Ireland and people right across the 27 member states. My understanding at the moment, though, is that an Irish driving licence can be renewed in Ireland up to 10 years after the date of expiry of the licence, but after this time the licence cannot be renewed and the person is no longer considered a qualified driver. So on foot of you raising this today, I will explore that further, but that's the best information available to me. The second point you make in relation to our diaspora, I have to acknowledge this comes up a lot, and when I met in my past posting, when I met Irish people abroad who were considering coming home, that issue of the driver's licence comes up time and time again, so you're quite right to highlight it. Our colleague, Minister Neil Richmond, is leading for government in relation to this in the context of the new diaspora strategy. I was going to say that we're working through trying to reach agreement with a number of US states, but you've expressed, I suppose, concerns about the speed of that. But I will ask Minister Richmond to come back to you directly with a reply on that. But I know he's doing some very good focused work with our embassy and consulate network in the US, and they've started with states where there's a high number of Irish people, which I think obviously makes sense. I'll also ask Minister Richmond to reflect upon what you've said in relation to learning from other EU countries that you perceive may do this in a more efficient or effective way. I think you mentioned Belgium and a number of others. But at the moment, the way we do it is that Ireland may make bilateral licence exchange agreements with non-EU jurisdictions. It's a technical and independent process. Reaching agreement, therefore, isn't just a matter of political will. It does have at its core that competency around road safety, which I know is something that we all take very seriously. And I'm told on average that assessment process, the technical independent process, is around a 2-year process as well. But in foot of you raising this today, and the fact that we're going to have a new diaspora strategy next year that the Minister Richmond is currently finalising and will bring to government next year, I'll ask that he specifically reflect on that issue of reciprocal arrangements in relation to driving licences.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach, for your reply. And I ask that this government gets rid of the 10-year limit on Irish licences for returning immigrants. These are people who passed the test in Ireland, held an Irish licence and currently have a valid driving licence. To now deny them a licence is arbitrary, unjust and indefensible. This is a slap in the face to Irish citizens returning home. This is not how we should be treating our people. It has zero impact on road safety. This is straightforward action which would immediately support the Irish diaspora and returning Irish citizens. The 10-year-old limit is not required under either Irish law or EU law. It is in the programme for government to resolve that. So you have spoken, you have discussed this around the table. Last week I sent this correspondence to Minister Sean Kenny, and he put it onto the NDLS and others. That's kicking the can down the road. We can't kick the can down the road in this issue. It's hugely important that we deal with that issue immediately. So the Minister, as far as I'm concerned, the Senior Minister, he could amend this requirement tomorrow with the stroke of a pen. Can that happen?
So without being argumentative, I'm not sure he can, based on the information available to me on the importance of anything we do in Ireland being in line in relation to that 10 years with the European legislation. But let me check on foot of you raising it here today, and I'll talk with Minister O'Brien, Minister Kenny and Minister Richmond as well. What we certainly can do, though, is look at how we can get those reciprocal arrangements in place. And we are very determined, and I know not just at a political level, but I know from the Irish ambassador to the United States down in terms of our diplomatic network there, that there is real work going on in terms of trying to reach those agreements. And you are right to identify the issue, as the programme for government does, because we want Irish people back in this country. We want their ingenuity, we want their contribution, we want to bring people home, and we need their skills often as well. Their families want them back, and this is something that comes up as a barrier in the long list of things people are trying to work through when planning on relocating back to Ireland, perhaps with a family and the likes. And if there's any hurdles we can remove here, we certainly should. So I'll speak to the relevant ministers on foot of you raising this and on the background of our new national diaspora strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Now on the standing order 38A, I call on Deputy Carl Nolan.
Will be aware